Yeah, when you
Oh,
say.
yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
We're live now still. I respect Heiko for doing this thing on short notice.
Yeah, when you
Oh,
say.
yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
We're live now still. I respect Heiko for doing this thing. Big on mute your YouTube. Yeah. All right. Yeah, obviously the title of this one's called What's Going On in Venezuela? Political talk show. We've got Heiko in the building. Peace to the three people that's watching right now. Hopefully the rest of these are coming in real quick. Big up Stefano Bonk. Big up Trolley McTrollface. Big up Tampa, Florida.
Trolley McTrollface. I did wonder. It's got a good name.
Got a good name still. I don't know. 11 people in there right now still. Big up ST225. All right, yeah, we're live now, man. Still. All right, cool. Obviously, this Venezuela situation is world news right now. But a lot of us ain't really educated on exactly what's happening. I look at you like as one of the main politically active guys in Speaker's Corner. So I thought let me go to Heiko and get, even I think you've spoken on it before in the park, you get me? But I wanted to do like a live explanation of what's happening there. We can throw in some questions maybe from the audience as well, you get me? To get a better understanding of exactly what is happening and how it's affecting the world, you get me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, if you want to give like a brief rundown, I don't know of like the current news of what's actually going down on the ground in Venezuela.
All right, maybe I give a little bit of background
Yeah.
and explain whatever knowledge I've got or what the basis of my knowledge is. Latin America has basically been, South America has basically been a playground for imperialism. By imperialism, I mean that the big capitalist powers have plundered South America for hundreds of years. And in the last 50 years, since the Second World War, this has basically been dominated by the United States of America. And the United States treated South America as its so-called backyard and regarded the maintenance of governments in that region that suited American interests as their main priority, or one of their main priorities in the world. And the consequence of that was that we had dictatorships in many countries directly supported by the United States of America. For example, in Argentina, in the 1960s till the 1980s, in Brazil, in Venezuela, de facto dictatorships and real reality of dictatorships in Guatemala, in Cuba, and so on and so forth. And the Cuban Revolution overthrew that. In Guatemala, it was an attempt to challenge that. In Chile in the 1970s, there was an attempt to challenge that. And one of the most dramatic and surprising revolutions of modern times was the Venezuelan Revolution, which began in 1998 with the election of Hugo Chavez as president. And Hugo Chavez came from an army background. He was actually in the paratroop regiment. He was an officer in the paratroop regiment, and he was sent on missions to fight against communist guerrillas. And when he was sent on these missions to fight against communist guerrillas, they gave him books about what the communists wanted. And when he looked at what they were saying, he thought, well, that's actually not such a bad idea, because Venezuela has, as we know now, perhaps someone told me a contradictory story, but basically it's well known that Venezuela has the largest, second largest, or third largest reserves of oil in the world. Depends whose figures you used. I met a Brazilian the other day. He said that the latest statistics show that Brazil has. But in any case, it's one of the largest reserves in the oil. And one of the problems with that is that oil countries tend to be extremely corrupt and dictatorial countries. Not all, but most of them, or certainly the more backward countries, economically backward countries, because they utilize the oil. An elite gains control of the oil, makes deals with foreign multinational companies, takes the resources for themselves, and leaves the population with nothing. And therefore, because they get oil out of the ground, and it's basically a gift from God, if you like, an elite can just lord over the people with extraordinary wealth, and the people get nothing because there's no need to develop manufacturing or agriculture in an organic fashion that will serve the whole development of the economy, because you can live just from what comes out of the ground. And of course, a few people get hold of that, connected to the multinationals, connected to the government, connected to the oil companies, and therefore they establish a society in which extraordinary wealth exists at one pole and extraordinary poverty at the other. And Caracas and the capital city and Venezuela basically lived like that for most of the 20th century. And combined with this is the fact that the blacks and the indigenous people are also doubly exploited, and the South Americans who've got white skins, who come from a Spanish or Portuguese background, tend to be the dominant strata, the dominant 15–20% within the population. So you've got a double, a sort of apartheid and an economic elite controlling society. So that was the condition till 1989. At the time of Tiananmen Square in China, and the events in 89, 30 years ago in Eastern Europe, the whole world's focus shifted onto that. But actually in Venezuela, there was an event that took place called the Caracazo. And in the Caracazo, the poor people came down from the hills. They came down from the hills because the people live in the hills, like favelas in Brazil. They live in shanty towns around the main cities, particularly in Caracas. Is a shanty town runs up the whole side of the city, and in the lower levels of the city, the wealthiest elite live, this white Spanish derived or Italian derived elite connected with the oil industry and every hangers on of that. They got houses in Miami and a house in Venezuela. Now, when Hugo Chavez was elected president, he wanted to what happened was, when he came down to the hills, the regime shot them and killed them in 1989. That created the resentment within the population that laid the foundation of political movement that led to the development of Hugo Chavez as a political revolutionary. He tried to overthrow the government by mobilizing a section of the armed forces in 1992. He was imprisoned. He got out of prison, became a national hero. And that national hero then was elected president in 1998 and took over the reins in 1999. 2002, there was a coup d'etat organized by the Americans, and the evidence is absolutely overwhelming to show that it was organized by the Americans. And that led to a mass movement on the streets to defend Chavez. And Chavez had tried to introduce some constitutional reforms. He wanted to democratize society and put power in the hands of the people, make the oil wealth serve the people. And then what happened is, when the April coup took place in 2002, the masses took to the street, brought him back to power. The coup d'etat failed, and it was the same people who were behind the present coup d'etat who were behind the coup at that time. Cisneros, the Americans, the State Department, and the oil elite, the church, and it was at the time section of the military. Now the military was on the side of Chavez. He shifted the balance of power. I'll carry on for a couple more minutes just to set this background scene. When Chavez defeated the coup, he believed in democratic change after his attempted coup in 1992. He tried to change the whole system democratically. And the way he thought he would do that was, we got this big pot of oil. So this big pot of oil has got so much money that we can give some to the poor to develop, or the majority to the poor to develop the economy, and still keep the rich elite happy. The problem is this, is that if you don't decisively break the power of the old elite, all they feel is it's like you're attacking them with many, with a million needles. And so every direction they go, they felt under attack, even though actually their wealth has increased. There was a Financial Times article today showing that the elite have got enormous wealth. And there's an article, a video I posted on from YouTube on my Facebook page this morning. And it shows that this story about there being no food in Venezuela is just a lie. The fact of the matter is there is food in Venezuela. The supermarkets are full. The problem is that people can't afford to buy the goods in the supermarkets, because after Chavez died in 2013, having introduced multiple democratic and economic reforms, not only internally in Venezuela, but across the whole of the continent and beyond. They paid, for example, for the unemployed in London to get free buses. They paid for the poor people in Harlem to have a heating oil, because they got oil refineries inside the United States and a network of oil gas stations in the United States, Cisco they're called, gas stations in the United States. And so Hugo Chavez he tried to win the hearts and minds of the oppressed and the poor around the world, and to galvanize within Venezuela support for revolutionary change. The problem is, because the people themselves were not technically and educationally competent in advancing these things, because they didn't have this long-term development of economy that we've had in Britain, France, Germany, and so on, where you got industrialized infrastructure, education, culture to some degree corresponding with that. The Venezuelans have still had a very backward economy, informal economy, like Pakistan or India and so on, where people just live from selling things on the street, you know, toilet rolls. I mean, I went to Venezuela in 2004. They sell toilet rolls, and some guy would sit there all day with like 10 toilet rolls on the street, or selling like copy DVDs on the street. And that's how they eked out their existence. And Chavez introduced educational, social, healthcare, fishing reforms, constitutional reforms, and so on. Which were some of the most advanced democratic reforms in the whole of the world. They introduced paid work for housewives. Housewives were paid money. I think it was around $300 US a month at one time they were paid. The Millennium Goals of economic development were achieved long in advance of nearly every other country in the world. They had one of the most rapid rates of growth in the world. But in 2013, after the economic crash on a world scale in 2008, and after a huge fall in the oil price, the whole game shifted. And what happened was that because the country was importing nearly every single commodity that it required for its economy, and then subsidizing the provision of those goods to the general population, what happened was the people would go, if you had access through cards and so on, to go and get oil, or cooking oil, or toilet paper, or basics of life that were provided by the government, chicken. They had these shops available for the general population called Mercal. Mercal was subsidized food for the people. And so everyone would get their food there. But of course, now, when you get your food in these cheap places, you need to buy other things that you can't get, that are imported and that are sold at basically foreign currency, basically US dollars. So you've got your own currency, your bolivar, and then you've got this gold bolivar or foreign currency for which you can purchase other things. And then multiplying that problem is the fact that the oil is so cheap in Venezuela. I mean, when I was in Venezuela, a small bottle of water like you buy in the shop here is much more expensive than filling an entire tank full of petrol. So what people do is they take the petrol from Venezuela across to Colombia and sell it in Colombia. And then with the money they make that, they're speculating, bring that money back in, purchase goods that they can get hold of, and then sell them on the black market again inside Venezuela. So the dual currency created by the oil industry and the lack of development of the general economy resulted in this chaos that you've seen, hyperinflation and so on, and people and it exacerbates that. So people still go and buy the oil, take it to the border regions. In the border regions, the indigenous people are allowed to sell the oil into Colombia, and so they go across the border, sell it to Colombia, and there's a whole network and chain of corruption going right the way even to the top of the government. It's not it would be false to pretend the government is an uncorrupted entity. It's also full of corrupt officials who tried to maintain this balance of power between the wealthy elite and the government. And the problem was, Chavez's instinct was always to shift to the left. Whenever these movements took place, I remember being at a meeting, he had this enormous power to connect with the masses and feel what their demands were and reproduce these demands, if you like, to the people and express those demands. But the problem was he didn't have this network below, this long-term developed infrastructure of social mobilization, social organization, consciousness, collectivity, and so on, that would have been required to consolidate the revolution and spread the revolution. And of course, he tried to resolve this question by various ways. He knew there were limits to what they had, Chavez this was, and he tried to achieve the objectives by spreading the revolution across the continent. So you had the Bolivian Evo Morales in Bolivia, you had Correa in Ecuador, you had the Sandinistas re-elected in Nicaragua, you had Lula in Brazil, you had a wave moving to the left. So everything appeared to be going fine. And then, of course, the Great Recession came, and the economic circumstances in all these countries meant there were difficulties with public expenditure, like there are in France, like there are in Britain, like there are in Germany. But in a poor country, or a country where you've got a vastly distorted economy, all these problems came to a head at once. And that's why, you know, the West has been able to claim, well, starvation, they're starving their people. Is the one thing is a complete and absolute lie, is that it's in any way a dictatorship. This country is a country where they've got alternative TV. The TV channels are dominated actually by the private media. The newspapers are dominated by the private media. The private media have got billionaires run the television news stations and so on. There are state ones, but the billionaires run the really powerful ones. I'll finish in just a second. And the consequence of that is they've made an alliance again. They've been trying again and again and again to overthrow the government. I mean, multiple attempts at coup d'etats. There was a couple of years ago, someone dropped some hand grenades from a helicopter, tried to overthrow the government, trying to inspire a revolt. Then there have been mass so-called general strikes by layers of the middle class. And these have all failed. And the present attempt is also, if you look at the pictures from today, and I watched the live broadcast, live streams from the Colombian border. I mean, imagine in a foreign country, you've got people mobilizing a lot. Richard Branson, for example, mobilizes a bloody pop concert right next to the Venezuelan border to get the hysterical lunatics from the far right in Venezuela hyped up, and then to throw rocks and stones and so on at the Venezuelan police across border guards across the border. And then they say they want to import humanitarian aid. Well, there's plenty of food, medicines and so on in the shops in Caracas that belong to the private businesses. You know, you can get anything you want in Venezuela.
So where's Richard Branson getting involved?
Richard Branson, well, he's part of the whole idiocy, the liberal idiots. You look at all the newspapers in Britain, and you'll see that the ones who you would think might be sympathetic to Venezuela, like the Independent or the Guardian, they are the most virulent. And they've been the most virulent all along, because it's always the liberals. They always say, oh, we want democracy, we want change, and so on and so forth. But actually, when something begins to affect their pockets, the lower layers of the middle classes, and rather than the very upper strata might be a bit more honest, at least. Whereas the intermediate layer, the upper intermediate layer, you know, they panic, because it's not just about, you know, if you're a billionaire, you can move anywhere in the world and be anyone you want. But if you've got a big house somewhere in Surrey or something like that, and then you get taxes imposed upon you, and you get, you know, and you no longer recognized as such a wonderful person as you thought you were. People don't recognize your qualifications anymore. People don't recognize how grand you are anymore. Suddenly you lose your authority in society. And this is the problem, that the sort of Hispanic middle classes or upper middle classes in Venezuela feel they've lost all authority. And so this is why they're so hysterical. And this milieu is interconnected with this sort of same psychology, the Richard Branson psychology, and he thinks he's a man of the people, you know. Anyway, I've said enough for now.
How cool. So the last elections that was held in Venezuela, I've heard a lot.
Election.
Yeah, but I've heard a lot. Well, not a lot still. I've heard a few sources saying that the president weren't completely fair in the elections. Like, I think he made it illegal for some people to run against him.
No.
I don't know if you heard anything about that.
The election last year was a recall election. And in the recall, basically in Venezuela, if you get 20% of the electorate to sign a piece of paper saying they want a recall, then you can get a recall referendum. The opposition had, since Maduro was elected in 2013 after Chavez died, they mobilized a hysterical campaign to call for a new election, so recall referendum. So they mobilized to get the signatures. The signatures were generally, or not all of them, but a significant number of them were fraudulent and so on. But nevertheless, Maduro and the government of Venezuela allowed the referendum to take, allowed the recall election. The opposition was so divided that they couldn't come up with a single candidate. Eventually they came up with one candidate, but he wasn't the most, the ideal candidate from their point of view. There were two candidates who stood, Chavez and I can't remember the other guy's name, and the other guy lost. Maduro got 67.8% of the vote, and it's an electoral voting system. It goes by your fingerprint. I mean, I've seen the ballot system there. You go and you put your fingerprint down. Your fingerprint shows up with who you are. Then you can place your vote. That's how your vote's placed. So Jeremy Hunt, he said, oh, they stuffed the ballot box. Well, no, there is a ballot box. It's the second ballot box. The first ballot box is your fingerprint. That's what decides who you are. So you can only vote once. And then the second, you get a sheet of paper that comes out that shows that you voted. And then you can drop that in a ballot box for reference checking. So it's much more secure, one of the most secure electoral systems in the world. And the former prime minister of Spain, Zapatero, he used to be the socialist prime minister of Spain. He was an electoral observer in Venezuela in May last year. And he confirmed that the elections were free and fair. Jimmy Carter had been there in the previous elections and confirmed the elections were free and fair. They had no foundation for the argument that Maduro didn't win the election. He won it hands down. The fact that they couldn't cobble together a candidate is a result of their own incapacity and weakness, which is reflected again in the inability to overthrow the government, despite having dozens of countries, the most important countries in the world, backing them without any concern about democratic rights. They just back them, and yet still they can't overthrow the government because actually, the opposition is a divided force, and so.
I was gonna ask why is what's happening in Venezuela like world news? Like why should we even care about it in the first place? How does it affect how the world works? Because
the government tried to shift the balance of wealth and power from the rich, to the poor, and this is an anathema to the present world system. You listen to Donald Trump, or you listen to the genius of the world who knows everyone's brain, Jordan Peterson. The only thing they can say about Venezuela or about socialism, Venezuela equals socialism. People are starving, people are hungry, people are going without. That shows socialism cannot work. What it actually shows is you basically cannot simply appeal to the upper stratum to give their wealth. You can't ask them to work together with you because they'll do everything they can to sabotage. You can see this in the Labour Party in Britain today. Jeremy Corbyn, for all his, everyone knows he's an advocate of dramatic social reform. And of course, that means that large layers of the middle classes are in a panic when they're confronted with that. And that's what's been reflected in the Labour Party in the last week with these sort of the more middle class. You hear their very posh accents, these people screaming about how Jeremy Corbyn is destroying their party that they love. And so it's the same thing, same process, but in power. And
so how is the rest of the world governments responding to what's happening in Venezuela? Like who's taking whose side and
complete insanity. I mean, it is complete insanity as far as Europe is concerned. For the Europeans to turn around and say, in 8 days, you must call new elections. I mean, they had their elections last May. They had from last May until January to complain about it. They raised no serious complaints. There were no serious investigations. They just made assertions that the elections weren't free and fair, or that some people had said the elections weren't free and fair. In fact, the National Assembly, which Guaido represents or claims to represent, has been suspended by the Constitutional Court in Venezuela because 4 members of parliament, Amazonias region, were clearly fraudulently elected. And because they refused to call new elections in that area, the National Assembly was suspended by the Constitutional Court. And so the arguments they're making about constitutionality behind what they're doing completely false. And then they say, oh, I'm president. You elect yourself president by standing on a demonstration saying, it's like me standing at Speaker's Corner saying I'm president of Britain. It's just completely ridiculous. And the guy, there's no constitutional foundation for it. The Constitution says that if a president is absent, which is the game they tried in 2002 with Hugo Chavez, because he was taken to an island, and so he's absent. So they said, in the absence of the president, who shall take over? The vice president's supposed to take over. But instead of this, the head of the National Assembly, which is dissolved or which is basically suspended, suddenly declares himself president. Who declared him president? Donald Trump declared him president. That's the fact of the matter, because within minutes of him having declared himself president, Donald Trump had tweeted he supports him, which means Donald Trump had organized it. And Reuters reported that Donald Trump's advisors had been phoning all the leaders of South America in advance of this action in order to justify, in order to get their support for the action they've been taking. And this whole charade today about humanitarian aid coming in as well, that's all been organized. That was all pre-planned before this announcement took place that Guaido was the president. So it's a pre-planned coup d'etat, organized, planned. The intention now is to create a parallel government, and that parallel government has got the Bank of England's money from Venezuela. It's got the money from America. They're stealing the oil resources of Venezuela in America, in the United States, and transferring that money to the opposition. One, to try and strengthen the economic position of the opposition. In any case, the opposition control the decisive levers of economic power. That's a problem that Maduro should have resolved. And ultimately, the real reason is this: they want to overthrow Venezuela, then go for Cuba. And then perhaps if they're successful, go for China. I think they'll fail in Venezuela in the first place.
Are you aware of the Petro-Carib organization?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier on. I mean, there were a number of initiatives taken by Venezuela to try and utilize the oil that they've got to create both supportive atmosphere in other countries and also to provide humanitarian aid for the rest of the world. So, for example, for the whole of South America and the Caribbean and North America, they offered something called, what was it called? Mission. I can't remember the name of it, but basically what they did was they cured the cataracts. They used laser surgery from Cuba and cured the cataracts in people's eyes and allowed tens of thousands of people to see for the first time, or again for the first time in their lives. They introduced medical care, health care, welfare services, and so on. And by exchanging oil for services, for example, they gave the Cubans oil in exchange for doctors. And so suddenly, thousands of doctors arrived from Cuba, and in every community in Venezuela, they had doctors. Suddenly, they had educators taken into the communities, and every community had educators, and the children learned how to read and write, not only to read and write and to learn modern technologies and so on, but also they had this thing called El Sistema, and El Sistema was a system to teach the children in the poorest communities in Venezuela to play the violin and play classical instruments. And they created the Simon Bolivar Orchestra, youth orchestra, which is many people, many of the top composers in the world and conductors in the world have said is the greatest orchestra in the world, reflecting the energy of the people transferred into art and culture. And so there were enormous achievements in Venezuela, which have gone backwards the last few years. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And it's that hysteria associated with that that's allowed them to try and turn everyone against them. Plus, there's been a shift against them in South America. Don't forget, Bolsonaro's election in Brazil is an important starting point for Trump to think, well, we're on the march in South America, we can smash all the Reds. That's the idea. And so, the programs they had for the Caribbean to facilitate economic trade with the Caribbean and to assist the other countries in the Caribbean to develop, those, of course, are in danger. Now, Guaido will say to everybody in the world that he's going to keep the same programs to try and get their support. But of course, as soon as they've got their, if they achieve their objective, overthrowing the government in Venezuela, well, then every government they can make demands of. You must do this, you must do this, you must do that. And so every government in the whole of South America will be subject to the dictates of the United States and Europe. So it's back to neo-colonialism.
I want to comment at this point.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that I've spoken like this, but I've got to go. That's the only thing. That's why I was as well. I got my piece out of the way.
Yeah. No problem. Yeah, I remember you said you was only going to be here for a short while anyway, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
no problem, man. Thanks for coming on the audio.
While you're speaking, my friend, but otherwise I have to leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
No worries.
I respect. Yeah, go on, Ziryab.
So I wanted to touch on a few points. To start off with, I think Heiko did a good job of explaining how is a branch of the State Department who coincidentally funded the coups in 2002 and most recently in 2014 in the so-called Day of Rage. But I want to hone in on a personality who has been all up in the videos and all up in the news articles and all up in the Marco Rubio, who is affectionately known as Little Marco by Trump. This whole public reality coup, it's a PR coup. And it's very fitting that a reality TV star from the reality TV star Trump is the kind of puppet master, so to speak. Because, you know, the whole adage of the revolution won't be televised. It's turned on its head. The revolution is evidently being led to believe. As Heiko said, the humanitarian aid, interestingly, we've been told that President Maduro has blocked off highways and whatnot, but as the article I sent you earlier, content indicating broadcasting.
Is it just me, or is Ziryab's mic breaking up?
No, it's breaking up. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I have to go.
The Canadian Broadcasting Channel.
Heiko, I respect
they did a revision of an article which indicated that highway was being blocked. The reality of the situation is that highway, and so we've been led to. There's something else of this. Max Blumenthal, the supermarkets are well stocked, so we don't see any empty shelves. Again, we've been led to believe. And another indicator is the huge lines. We're talking about blocks upon blocks upon blocks, where Venezuelan people, and you can catch these online. You can catch it. Where lining up block after block after block to sign an open letter saying, stay away from Venezuela, hands off Venezuela. You can't force charity on people. That doesn't take away from the fact that the situation in Venezuela is problematic in the economic sense, and they are going through some difficulties, and that's due to the economic war that's been placed upon them. Now, Heiko also mentioned the 2002 coup, and I think it's very important that we mention how it has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt the US were through the US State Department the whole coup, and moreover there was
Hello.
Yo, Ziryab, hey family, I don't know what's going on for your connection, you keep cutting out,
Hello.
But, yeah. Are you saying your name, fam?
Buenas tardes. I am in Venezuela.
You're in Venezuela?
Yes.
Okay, you're the man on the ground. Give it to us raw then, man. What's happening? Hey, Ziryab, I'm gonna let my man take over still, cause the connections, I don't know, I think you got a weak connection, fam. We can't hear you too good, man. He keeps cutting out. But we got Venezuelan right now in the building, so we're gonna make him give us a breakdown of what's happening in Venezuela.
Yes.
Yeah, go on, brother.
Hello. This is true what this guy before is telling. A lot of this is what he's telling. Sorry, my English not so good. But the 2002, the golpe estado, the coup d'etat, which they make with the support of the U.S. government and this oligarchy of the Venezuela, with the families Mendoza and the Carmonas, who were also autoproclaimed himself like self-declared president exactly at this moment also. He is now in hiding in Colombia after the golpe estado, which has failed in 2002. And it was also a build-up until that moment through general strikes and all other kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm there. Yo, oh, mad thing. Probably they got dashed out the call for a mad thing. It's just me one right now. Hey, jump back in, man. I don't know what happened still. If you man are still listening, I don't know how you got kicked out still, but ain't air no more. I'm air my one still. So jump back in when you're ready, man. But yeah, let me take over anyway until they jump back in. But yeah, I was talking about the Petro Carib earlier. I was asking Heiko about that still. Cause obviously, man's got Jamaican parents in it, so I got interest in what's happening in the region. And Venezuela, they done a deal with a lot of the Caribbean countries to purchase oil on like for mad cheap in it. They got special deals still, like through that the Caribbean. They want to see the region develop, and that they was able to purchase oil for a lot cheaper than some of their main purchasers like America and all of those type of people. You get me? And the agreement was like, let me find it still. Cause I don't want to mess it up and get it wrong. The payment system allows for purchase of oil at market value for 5% to 50% upfront, with a grace period of 1 to 2 years. The remainder can be paid through a 17 to 25-year financing agreement with 1% interest of oil prices are above $40 US per barrel. So that's an ill deal. Jamaica was using a lot of that money, well, they're supposed to be using a lot of that money, obviously corruption and bad things in it, but they're supposed to be using a lot of that money to develop programs to develop the country, you get me? And yeah, since that, America was bang on shutting down that program there, you get me? Like that was trying to call for the Caribbean countries to come out of that deal there, you get me? I don't see no reason why they should come out of that deal there. It seems like a good deal still. If a man's gonna give you oil for a mad cheap price, and you can pay it back in like 20 years or something like that, I don't know why you tell a man to come out of that deal there, you get me? But obviously I wanted to run that past IQ and them and there still and get like some different perspectives of what might be their reason. But Jamaica also took loans off of IMF, and obviously the deal weren't so favorable. They all in debt right now to this day, like some mad crazy debts. One sec, that's how we got the Venezuelan back in the building. Sorry fam, I ain't good with names, so I ain't gonna remember your name still, Kai. It's got some pronunciation still, but continue on from where you left off, man. I don't know what happened. You got thrown out.
We can go fast forward. We can talk about this guy that is self-proclaimed interim president of Venezuela, which organized this coup attempt once again. He used this Article 233 from the Constitution of Venezuela to revoke the current constitutional president, which was elected last year, due to that they have boycotted the elections. Parts of the opposition, but Henry Falcon, who was ex-Chavista from El Estado Zulia, the Zulia region, one of the most petrol-rich regions. He was ex-Chavista, and he turned to the opposition by creating a Social Democratic Party. And he participated in these elections last year in the presidential elections. But parts of the opposition, which Juan Guaido is part of, you can say he is trained by the CIA programs and by non-violent student coordination organizations in Serbia, which overthrew also Milosevic. This organization is called Canvas. There are evidence for this reports from meetings in Mexico that they have with the Serbian group called Canvas. This guy named who is training this Juan Guaido, his name is Srbis Popovic. You can search it on the internet and find out about this guy. He wrote a book called about Blueprint, Revolution Blueprint. Yes. So now in Venezuela, the situation is a bit exaggerated from the part of these groups. We are not dying in hunger. This is lies. We are not in this kind of situation. And all field report, you can all talk to whoever you want in this barrio zones, and nobody is really supporting this Juan Guaido guy. he's a CIA tactician who want to intervene in the Venezuela and to get control of the petroleum. They have tried with this from the beginning. From 1999, when Hugo Chavez was elected and broke this two-party system, which was like the American two-party system, Christian Democrats and this Acción Democrático. So it was like Republicans and the Democrats in the United States. He created the third way and did it with having his backup from the military and the poor indigenous people and the black community, Afro-Venezuelan community, and getting this through elections in 1999.
Keep going.
Yes. So this guy, he has a coalition with Chile, with Piñera, and also with ¿cómo se llama? El Iván Duque, who was newly elected in Colombia. Iván Duque also had this background in these paramilitary groups in Colombia. The previous leader of his party was Álvaro Uribe. Álvaro Uribe, who is now in process of trial in the European courts. Sweden has revoked a case on him for genocide on campesinos, on these village people in the south of Colombia, in the border with Ecuador. So his coalition is based on fascists like Piñera, a Chilean president who was working with Pinochet, who also made coup d'etats back up through the 70s and 80s, and Iván Duque and Bolsonaro from Brazil. But Bolsonaro did not participate today on this meeting. They tried to put through the human aid medicine. It was like 20 toneladas who they tried to put through the border in Venezuela, and this medicine and this human aid would only be sufficient for 5,000 people for 1 week. This was nothing. It was only a show. Okay, so he is trying to create a peak moment when he can get legitimized in the UN. He is not still accepted in the United Nations as the interim president, and he cannot
So tell us how what's the general mood of the people on the ground in Venezuela? Because obviously there's been a lot of reports of people fleeing Venezuela. I don't know if that's true.
No, this is not true. This is always a movement in the border of the Cucuta, this place where they try to put through the human aid in the bridge of the Simon Bolivar International Bridge. Okay, so this bridge has also been closed. The parts of this bridge, 10 kilometers from the Simon Bolivar International, they are showing like trucks and tanks that are blocking the roads. But these roads have been closed for 3 years, and this was invoked by the Colombian government, not by Nicolás Maduro. So the general mode on the level, these Venezuelan people are not, the majority of Venezuelan people are not supporting this Juan Guaido, and the majority of people are supporting Nicolás Maduro. But also, a lot of people are critical of Nicolás Maduro, but are not supporting Juan Guaido. Do you understand? To be critical to Nicolás Maduro does not, for instance, mean that, and it does not mean that you are de facto supporting Juan Guaido. This is, for the majority of people, we don't want American intervention or any kind of external intervention to our sovereignty.
Yeah. Hey,
Bottom line.
What are you saying? Hey, 160 reps. So you're in Venezuela. You live in Venezuela, yeah?
Yes, I live in Barrio Petar in Caracas.
Okay, so right now I'm gonna let you know right now. Still, you're promoted. You're the COE correspondent for Venezuela right now. You need to get a uniform and get some pictures. Get your camera and show us what's actually happening on the ground, man. And we broadcast that, man.
Yes, yes, we need to be better organized in how we put this through in this international platform, because this is where the pressure is coming from. It's not coming from the inside; it's coming from the outside.
Yeah, we want to show the world. We want first-hand information. We want to show the world exactly what's happening, for the better or worse. You get me? And everybody make up their own mind rather than just getting oh my days, man, just dropped out again. Rather than getting second-hand information, man. I don't. If we got the opportunity to get first-hand information, then we take the first-hand information all the time. You get me? Second-hand information is only if that's the only option, man. Then we have to do bare guesswork to see if it's true and rare. We just see for ourselves. You get me? That's like I'm like having anyone on there, man. All views and opinions welcome on COE. But yeah, that's the COE Venezuelan correspondent reporter right there right now. When he comes back. But yeah, Ziryab, do your thing, fam.
See, that's the importance. The bottom line from what he said is one can be critical of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and not necessarily support Juan Guaido. That support is coming from outside, and it's a PR stunt. The humanitarian aid is a PR stunt. He broke down the numbers of how many people that food would actually feed 5,000 people. So it's another PR stunt. The concert that's being organized in Colombia is another PR stunt. And again, we have to remember Trump was a reality TV star. You know what I mean? So the fact of the matter is, this guy is on the ground. He's speaking from what he sees. And as such, like I can't overstate the importance of having that voice on this channel right now, especially with what he talked about in regards to the Afro-Venezuelans being a part of the coalition that was brought into power by Hugo Chavez, breaking that two-party dominance, that Coco Pepsi type of politics. He brought that third way, and he brought the downtrodden people along with him. And so I think this is what Heiko was also like kind of alluding to with the whole kind of problems that the elite had was, I think it was best explained by the COE correspondent in Venezuela. There's not much more you can say after that. You know what I mean?
See that, man. So yeah, I don't know. So what's your take on like on the world stage, like how all the other countries are responding to what's happening in Venezuela? What do you make of it? Who do you see is taking whose side and for what reasons?
Yeah, so what you have is the Russians are aware. The foreign minister or the foreign ministry spokesperson, Maria something or other, made the statement to the effect that, what's being planned here is regime change. And the Russians are very much aware of the fact a faction of the US government, that is to say the neo-conservative imperialist agenda, is bent on regime change, incorporating those nations which are outside of the remit of the global financial system, read the US dollar imperialism. So the mere fact that Venezuela had the gall to attempt to trade outside of the parameters that the US sets was reason enough for it to be targeted. So you have Russia, China, and a few other nations from the global south that are defending Venezuelan sovereignty, because again, that's what the COE correspondent was making mention of. At the end of the day, you can have differences in politics and you can disagree with the president, but that doesn't mean that you want some next power to come into your country and tell you how to run things and so on and so forth. So the support of these nations from Russia and China and so on for the sovereignty of Venezuela is just that. They are stating that Venezuelans must decide the future of Venezuela, and it's not for external countries to come to their aid. As I said, you can't force charity.
So he's saying,
so
but do you think it's just purely that alone, or do you think they have any other agenda attached to their support for them?
Well, let's be real. Let's be realistic. It's not from the goodness of their hearts that the Russians or the Chinese are supporting the Venezuelan government. But so yeah, to finish that line of thought there's plenty of business deals that Russians are engaging with the Venezuelans and have been for a long time, and so have the Chinese. That's a fact of life. But that doesn't take away from the notion of sovereignty, which interestingly, the supporters of intervention seem to forget, they're all for sovereignty when it comes to the West, but when it comes to developing nations or the global South, then sovereignty isn't too much of an issue, because, you need to follow our dictates, you need to follow our developmental model, you need to follow our economic ideology. So the mere fact that there are nations which are bucking the trend, Russia and China are showing different development models, it basically chips away at the neoliberal perspective. The neoliberal perspective, which is integrated into the globalization model, dictates that you have to open up your markets, you have to have free trade, you have to liberalize, and so on and so forth, and have foreign direct investment. And what these nations like Russia and China are showing is that there is a different developmental model that can occur. Not to say that they don't utilize that, but they also utilize protectionism, which is almost a taboo in the neoliberal kind of model. So yes, I can accept that Russia and China are benefiting, and they have benefited from the current government, but I guess that's because they are engaging with the government as it is, and they have been for a long time, as in, they didn't see. This is the difference. China has a policy of non-intervention and non-interference, and Russia has that same policy as well. So this is the distinction between the Western nations and Russia and China, for example, in that the Western nations will intervene through the means, or through ostensibly under the title of humanitarian intervention. Now, that's problematic, and that's what the Venezuelan was saying just there. We have sovereignty, and we are going to decide. You can't come and tell us that we need to change it up, or you can't just have a unilateral declaration. And this is the point. It's so starkly like reality TV, and it's so fitting that Trump would be at the forefront of this, because essentially the declaration of Juan Guaido on TV of him being interim president is enough for us to accept now, supposedly, that he's the interim president. So it's happening right in front of our eyes, and as far as I can see, there's going to be further destabilization.
Yeah, so I don't know how did that work, man, and who's recognizing this new guy as the interim president?
So as far as I can see, America, the Lima countries, the Lima group of countries, so that's Canada, and some other South American countries, except for Mexico. Mexico and Mexico and Cuba, of course, they have rejected this guy, and they're not accepting him. Russia also hasn't accepted. China hasn't accepted him, and so there is an attempt.
What about Britain? What about Britain? What's their stance?
I think the last time I checked, Britain has accepted or acknowledged, and is pushing for wider recognition and acknowledgement of Juan Guaido.
Yeah.
So all of this is under the title of legitimization campaign through a myriad of means. One being the humanitarian angle, so they're trying to tell us that the situation in Venezuela is so desperate that Maduro is illegitimate and this new guy is legitimate. The other angle is the so-called excesses of the Venezuelan government, and this is the other interesting thing: the false flag incidents that are occurring. The latest, as it is today, was right-wing paramilitary affiliated Colombians, right, taking over Venezuelan National Guard vehicles and ramming the border. And this is the thing: we would not accept this in any other nation. We certainly wouldn't accept it in Britain. But for some reason, over there, when it happens, it's somehow justified, and it beggars belief. But the point of what I'm getting at is these incidents, these false flag incidents, are just going to become more and more. I think I just read today on BBC News that a couple of people were killed, and it's being blamed on the Venezuelan security services. And this is just going to ramp up. There's just going to be more and more and more of these type of incidents. And
you're saying they're trying to win turn public opinion against
hearts and minds. Exactly. Yeah, it's a delegitimization campaign, and it's just going to become more and more. And the thing is, there's ample precedent for it, whether we're looking at Ukraine, and that's what I mentioned earlier, but I think I might have been cut off in the Ukrainian situation. they're called jackals, and this is the point. John Perkins, the economic hitman, has laid out the plans and how it goes. And one stage is the jackals being sent in, snipering people, killing people, and causing turmoil and violence. And essentially, this is attested to in Ukraine. But before that, in 2002, as I was mentioning, I don't know if it came through, but in 2002, with the coup that occurred in Venezuela, the short-lived coup, there were snipers who were shooting at the Chavistas when they marched upon the palace to demand the reinstating of the president Hugo Chavez. There were snipers being used, and this is all. The snipers were foreigners again, and this is the thing. It's all attested to. If you go and look it up, it's all in the public domain now. So in regards to this tactic being utilized, as I said, in Ukraine it was utilized as well. And there's a professor called Ivan Kachanovsky, who's at the University of Ottawa, and he's published a whole series of articles and papers on the matter of the Snipers Massacre. It's called The Snipers Massacre on the Maidan in Ukraine. That's the title of it. So if you look that up and put in Ivan, you'll find the paper that I'm referring to. And he's done some deep research into the use of Georgian snipers in Maidan in Ukraine. And that's another example in the same situation in Syria, whereby we were told these protesters were being were peaceful protesters and whatnot. And then they were just attacked by the government for no reason, and they were killed. But then again, this is the point. You can accept that narrative, or you can look a bit deeper and realize that it's the same old tactic of destabilization. So today, we've heard the Venezuelans have apparently killed 2 people on the border in Brazil, and I kind of.
We talking about this random Venezuelans.
No, this is the thing. Military. They're trying to
say the military.
They're saying the military done it, or security forces in Venezuela.
What's the source?
The point of what I'm getting at is, the point I'm getting at is that it's going to be ramped up. There's going to be more false flag attacks. There's going to be more killings that are going to be blamed on the government, because right now, evidently, they are losing the war with. When they tell us that, right, these people don't have food and so on and so forth, but then someone like Max Blumenthal walks through supermarkets in Caracas and you can see food, like, it's a problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is only going to kind of boil the blood of the propagandists and the PR people behind this stunt. And it's going to become worse and worse. And there's going to be attacks on symbols. There's going to be attacks on institutions and installations that are attached to the state. And I think is only going to ramp up worse. And I want to just kind of attach it to the wider happenings in the Caribbean area, especially in Haiti and Nicaragua.
Haiti, I was going to say, I forgot to ask Heiko about that as well, because apparently everyone that's rebelling in Haiti has got something to do with what's happening in Venezuela as well at the moment. I don't know if you heard anything about that.
Yeah, so the situation in Haiti is ramping up, and the point of it is it's another destabilization campaign. They are marching on the presidential palace, and there's all types of turmoil in Haiti and also in Nicaragua. And I think those two, I don't think they're disconnected. I think this strife and turmoil that's occurring in the Caribbean is interlinked and it's interlaced. And we'd do well to try and kind of connect it all together. Our focus is on Venezuela, and rightly so, but also there are incidents that are occurring in the wider geographical area.
Like, you see Haiti in particular. I heard that the same thing. Like they got to deal with Petro-Caribbean. There was one of the Caribbean countries that signed up to that. You get me, sir?
Yeah, you want to talk on that a bit? Like, tell the people then what the Petro-Carib is.
Yeah, I was explaining when you first got cut out. You get me? But apparently now in Haiti, the corruption, the people are wilding out against corruption, innit? And they're saying that a lot of the funds that's being raised off of that is just going into people's pockets, innit? And like they're fed up of it. You get me? Like they're supposed to be building up the infrastructure of the country, and all these products was that's been promised to them. Nothing ain't happening with the money. You get me? It's like Venezuela, and it's the same thing in Jamaica, fam. Like there was a time when Cuba sent over light bulbs, innit? Like energy saving light bulbs, like a bag of them for just to give out to the people for nothing. You get me? But by the time they reached Jamaica, it's like I don't know who took them and just started selling them. You get me? So it's corruption, fam. If the people don't know, like you were saying though earlier, fam, if the people don't know what's happening, then they're just oblivious to what's happening. And they would have just bought the light bulbs and not thought nothing of it. But obviously, where everything's internet right now, it's hard to keep secrets like that. Like you can't get a whole shipment of light bulbs from Cuba with the instruction to hand them out to the people for free and sell them to the people and think the people ain't gonna know that they were supposed to be given for free. They're gonna start wiling out when they're like, "What are you charging me for something that you got for free and you've been told to give to me for free?" So I think that's what's happening in Haiti as well right now. You get me? Like they're supposed to be seeing some of that oil money that Venezuela's practically giving out for next to nothing. And yeah, corruption's supposed to be rampant in Haiti, man. In the Caribbean in general, you get me? I know in Jamaica it's high, you get me?
Yeah. And it shows you the kind of solidarity that we're talking about, which the imperialists seek to destroy. This solidarity that was instituted and institutionalized by Hugo Chavez with the Caribbean nations and the Afro-Caribbean world. You see, this is, again, it's problematic because too many a time, what we know of humanitarian aid, it has strings attached to it. You know, whether it's changing up your democratic or your process, your political process, or whatever it is, there's attached. When the West give humanitarian aid out, there's strings attached. Whereas in the case of Venezuela, they're just giving it out to people, or in Cuba, they're just giving it out to people, and that's a problem to the dominant narrative and to the dominant kind of powers. So I think it's very interesting that you said those 2 points there.
Yo, you put your mic on mute, you know.
Yeah, I was passing it back over. Is
okay.
Yeah.
I thought you got cut off still, but yeah, fam. Yeah, well, boy, I ain't gonna front still. I would like to hear from like opposing opinions. You get me? I don't want everything to just be like in agreement. You get me? You know my thing, fam. I like to see how things look from all of the different perspectives, so I can make up my mind about something. You get me? So I'm putting a call out there still. If anybody who's got who's knowledgeable about what's happening in Venezuela, feel like they want to jump on and explain things, we feel like we doing a bad job representing what's happening, the platform's there. You get me? Just let me know in the comment section. Tag me, content over everything. Send me an email, and you could jump on, man. I see Ralph Wyden in the comments still, sir. I already sent you one. If you check your hangout still, if you want to jump on, you can jump on. But yeah, anybody else? Come on, man. Yeah. But yeah, fam, I like knowing what's happening in the world. You get me? As I say, fam, especially in the region of the Caribbean, Venezuela's playing is a big influencer. You get me? Like what happens in Venezuela has a big impact on what's happening in man's own country. You get me? I don't know about you. Which part are you from?
You asking me?
Yeah.
What part of the world I'm from? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I'm from Ethiopia originally. That's where my peoples come from. But
okay.
Obviously, I was born and bred here, innit?
Yeah. Ethiopia, yeah. Saying that I'm from, so don't know the rest of man them check for Ethiopia like it's the motherland. You get me?
Yeah.
It's a family thing, same way. You get me?
Yeah, straight. But yeah, if anyone's out there that has got a different opinion that wants to kind of address what's been said, by all means, come on. I look forward to it.
Yeah, Ralph ain't on it still, so it's not your subject. But
But can I just flesh out the point about, you know, where this is going? Because this is just the first stage. As I said to you, it's not working correctly. And I think the live streams from the border indicated the criminality of the people on the Colombian side of the border. I saw Colombian flags being waved, and I'm supposed to believe these people are Venezuelans. So I think it's laughable. Again, the attempts that are being made to delegitimize the Maduro government. But if we was to even look at the articles which Guaido kind of utilized and leaned on, I think that would be interesting as well. But yeah, let's just remember that during the aggression against Syria, at least 130,000 international fighters were brought in from various parts of the world, including Xinjiang in China. And so my point about ramping up and the kind of development of the situation in Venezuela, so it's only going to end badly, and it's going to get much worse before it gets better. As I said, if we look at the Syria situation, for example, I mean, yeah, we can see how like international brigades were basically brought in. And I think there was an article that came out from Cuba mentioning how there was a buildup of army of American troops on the Colombian side of the border. So it may well be a direct invasion. It may well be an indirect invasion, as it was in Syria for a long time. And I think there's plenty of people who would be willing to fight against the Venezuelan state as it stands now. But interestingly, if the Venezuelan guy comes back, he can tell us a bit more about how the situation on the Colombian side is. I mean, this is just as bad, if not worse, than the situation in Venezuela. But we're not being told about what's happening in Colombia because Colombia is well within the orbit of the Anglo-American Empire. So moving to the Article 233, it says, because remember, the Juan Guaido was the president of the National Assembly, and he utilized Articles 233 and another one to kind of justify his declaration. But if we just read it out real quick, Article 233 states, the President of the Republic shall become permanently unavailable to serve by reason of any of the following events: death, resignation, removal by office by decision of the Supreme Tribunal of Justice, permanent physical or mental disability certified by a medical board designated by the Supreme Tribunal of Justice with the approval of the National Assembly, abandonment of his position. And I think there's rumors going out that Maduro has fled the country and he's gone over to to Colombia, but it's nonsense. And again, context is important and context is king here, because when we go back to Ukraine or Yemen, for instance, the two incidents of Ukraine and Yemen kind of illustrates the hypocrisy at the center of this narrative, which is aiming to destabilize and delegitimize and destroy the Venezuelan state. In Yemen, what you had was Ali Abdullah Saleh, or Al-Mansur al-Hadi, who came into power, who was the favorite of the U.S. Elite and the U.S. kind of establishment. He was president. So he was interim president. So he was supposed to be president until elections were formed. What happened is that these elections were delayed again and again and again. So it's not like Venezuela where there was an election and they're just disputing whether there was no election in Yemen. Al-Mansur al-Hadi delayed it again and again and again. The Houthis then said, well, we're not going to wait around no more, and mobilized their organization to take over the institutions of the Yemeni government. Al-Mansur al-Hadi then fled to Saudi Arabia, right? And interestingly, the international community, quote unquote, meaning the US and her allies, said that we don't accept the Houthis and Al-Mansur al-Hadi is still the president. Whereas when we go over to the Ukraine situation, you had Yankovic leave the country due to the agitation by a group of people within Ukraine. Yankovic was the president. He left and fled to Russia, right? And as such, Victoria Nuland of the US stated that Yankovic was no longer legitimate because he had fled the country. So they're playing loose and fast by the same rules that they want us to hold firm to. And I think that example kind of illustrates that. But again, the point here is that Maduro hasn't fled the country, and he's still in the country, and he's still ruling by virtue of his mandate. Abandonment of his position. So he hasn't left. Duly declared by the National Assembly and recalled by popular vote. And that's what Heiko was kind of indicating earlier. When an elected president becomes permanently unavailable to serve prior to his inauguration, a new election by universal suffrage and direct ballot shall be held within 30 consecutive days. Pending election and inauguration of the new president, the president of the National Assembly shall take charge of the presidency of the Republic. So it's here that he's trying to use this. But the point is that none of the conditions for this to occur have occurred. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I used to. All right. Well, cool, man. Boy, unless my wanted to add on anything else, you know, fam, it was just we can just keep it brief like that, you know. Just give the people them something where they can just watch back and just take it in, so they don't have to watch a whole 5-hour show just trying to get a breakdown of what's happening. You get me? Like, I feel like you and Heiko broke it down nicely still. Obviously, like I said, we didn't really get no opposing or different angles to view the thing from still. I would have loved to get that as well still. Opposing opinions, I love airing them, you get me? But is what it is still. The invitation's been out there, no one ain't replied still, so it is what it is, you get me? But differently as well, True Man was talking about the Caribbean a bit. I want to give a direct call out to my Caribbean family them. I want to start a Caribbean our corner, you get me? I want to start our corner for every region of the world, you know, fam. Every country. I want to start our corner for them because I like learning, like I said, fam, first and from people who's experiencing what's happening in their ends, you get me? Or who's got ties to family members back in their ends. So we can get like a nice picture, like a clear picture of how the world works, you get me?
You gotta let our Venezuelan brother wrap it up.
Well, you say we got a Venezuelan correspondent back on the building yet? I say that, fam. I'm gonna make you take back over still, cause I was wrapping up the show, you get me? But you came back still. If you want to add in anything else, man, you can do that still.
Yeah, I want to thank you for you doing this alternative program, to sending alternative voice. Of course, we are not only supporting blindly the current government, but we have to be on our feet. Yes, do you understand what I'm saying? Because yes, there are people, very corrupt people like Diodaus Cabello, the current president of the National Assembly, the Constitutional National Assembly, which he has involvement in narco traffics, and he has a very strong loyalty in the military. So we have to have a pragmatic thinking. We can not only just we can not only just put down one of these guys that is in the military involved in the narco traffic business, because this will push back the revolution. Yes, so we are very conscious of the internal problems in the current government also, but it is very complex. This is the only thing I want to just put inside this discussion, but this is usually known as internal discussions which we have inside of our nations. Like Farrakhan said, this things is a nation problem. It is not an external problem. Okay, but I put it out there now for you guys because I understand this is a conscious channel, so we can also have internal critics.
Love the nuance. Respect, brother. Respect.
Yeah, most definitely. I take it that you're Afro Venezuelan, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, brother. Yeah, give your explanation, man.
Peace out.
Let's see, you're done, yeah. All right, cool, man. And like I said, right now, you're my only Venezuelan contact. You get me, sir? You're the unofficial COE correspondent for Venezuela, sir. Anytime you got my email address, you just text me information, keep me up to date on what's happening. there's any breaking news, you got the platforms open, man. You can express that on COE. You get me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Tomorrow is Sunday, but on Monday we go back to work, and the life continues. The struggle continues.
Okay.
In
Yeah, man.
Venezuela.
Big up Venezuela. Solidarity with Venezuela and all the
Viva
Venezuelan
Venezuela.
people.
Viva Venezuela. Come on. I
Gran
want to.
compañero, a todos los saludos de una revolución bolivariana que tenemos aquí. Viva!
Yeah, Viva Venezuela, fam. I'm gonna pretend like I understand what you're saying. Everybody hit up the COE Bentley Fund. We need to we need to get cameras over there. We need to get high quality cameras and microphones out there, so my man can give us some live interviews from the people. Them, you get me? So we can get boots on the ground, first-hand information rather than relying on everybody telling you what's happening in Venezuela. We can see for ourselves. You get me? All right then. But Ziryab, yeah, man's gonna wrap up the show still. If you want to say any final words before man wrap up still.
That's it. We can't. Everything's been said. Big up the Venezuelan COE correspondent, and Viva Venezuela.
All right then. Respect for coming in as well, my brother. Yeah, short notice thing as well. You get me? But yeah, respect for coming on. And yeah, like I was saying before, the Venezuelan correspondent came on. Man wanna get our corner all over the world. Big up more in the higher still. Man's been dashing them bare graps throughout the whole duration of the show still. Man said big up the Venezuelan correspondent. Big up more in the higher fam. Man, them supporting the belly fund all the time. But yeah, like I said, fam, I want to get first-hand information of how the world works. You get me? I big up Sosa as well, Wave Gang. I want to get first-hand information of how the world works still, sir. Man, need the cooperation from everybody who's all over the world. You want their story to be expressed directly. You get me? No cut, fam. No middleman. You get me? Like COE is a platform where I'm gonna give you that right. You get me? To just talk the thing how you want to talk it. Like I said, fam, even if it's against me, there's been a man who's come on my platform and spoke directly against me. Like shout out Ahmed Ali, you get me? You can see them videos, fam. They're still uploaded on my channel, you get me? So I don't feel like you're gonna get like what you're gonna say is gonna get remixed or twisted to go against how you want it to sound, you get me? Like the platform's open, man. I want to get first-hand information. Man, have a risk being offended if you want to hear the truth. And we just go from there, man. From we know how the world's working, then we can make more informed decisions about how we want to go forward in life, you get me? So that's what COE, that's what I'm trying to dedicate this platform to, man. So our corner, we want our corner in every different part of the world. We want to see them represented. So come all at COE, and man, will make something happen, man. But yeah, that's the end of the show. Respect for all of the viewers who logged in and learned something. You get me? That's it, man. We're wrapping up. Peace.